Hello, everybody. I'm Sydney from PhoneDog.com, and welcome to this special interview. I'm joined now by Mr. Cooper, Martin Cooper, who is known as the creator of the cell phone. So, first of all, Mr. Cooper, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it very much.
Well, it's my pleasure, Sydney, and please call me Marty.
Okay, Marty, I will. So, Marty, can we start by talking about that first cell phone? A lot of our viewers wanted to know what inspired you and your team to create it. So could you talk a little bit about that and then, just tell us about the phone itself?
Sure. The genesis of that phone was, interestingly enough, a battle that was going on because you know that cellular, the idea of cellular was created by Bell Laboratories,
Okay.
which was a part of AT&T in the old days. And that's a different AT&T than we have today. That AT&T was the largest company in the world by every measure, number of people, revenues, everything. And they had a monopoly on the telephone service. And they invented this thing called cellular. And then around the late 1960s, they said, we want to commercialize this. And among the attributes of their dream was that this was going to be a monopoly. They were going to be the only carrier. And the second thing is their idea of what cellular was car telephones. And I was at Motorola at the time, and we were or at least I was running a portable business. We believed that people really wanted the freedom to be everywhere when they communicated. And the idea that people would now be trapped in their cars, just as the wire had trapped them in their homes and their offices, it just was anathema to us. So we decided that we were going to convince the world, first of all, there ought to be competition. And second of all, the world is ready for handheld phones.
Yeah.
Imagine we had to talk people into that in the 1960s. And so around 1973, we got word that the FCC, they're the people that actually allocate all these spectrum, and that they were about to make a decision, and we were really worried that it was going to be the wrong decision. And I decided that we were going to make a dazzling display. We actually built a cell phone and the system that supported it, and we took it to New York, took it to Washington to show it to our legislators and to the FCC to prove that not only could portables be done, but it didn't have to be AT&T that did it. And that was why we built that phone.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid at the time, but I remember when AT&T was a monopoly and whenever they broke it up. So like I mentioned, before we started, we have some questions from our viewers. Here's one from Adrian about that first cell phone. This is kind of an interesting question. He wanted to know why the phones were so big.
Oh, well, it's hard to describe to people what the technology was like back in 1903. But there were, number one, there were no personal computers, never mind cell phones. There were no large-scale integrated circuits. These chips that we have in the cell phone and in your computer, well, they just didn't have that. They were just starting to make integrated circuits at that time. So we had to build that cell phone with lots of hundreds, actually a couple of thousand individual parts, and squeeze all those parts into a box. And when my team actually designed the phone, it was a little phone about this big that probably could have been used as a cell phone today. And then we took it to the engineers who had to put all those thousands apart, and this phone just grew and grew and grew, and it ended up weighing 2.5 pounds, full of all kinds of parts.
Wow. 2.5. How big was it?
Well, it was huge, about that big. In fact, before we're finished, I'll see if I can find one around the house. I don't know why I didn't think of having that here. But it was 10 inches high, and as I say, weighed 2.5 pounds.
Yeah.
The battery life was 20 minutes.
Wow.
But that wasn't, you couldn't hold it up for 20 minutes. It was so heavy.
Wow. Here's one from Emil, and this is actually something that I never thought about, but it was kind of a funny question. They wanted to know why the zero button is at the bottom on the dial pad. I don't know if you had anything to do with designing that.
No, oh, isn't that the way it is on all phones?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that was something that you guys came up with or if that was already
Well,
done.
we were trying to imitate the ordinary telephone, and
Oh,
so
okay.
and that was designed by the telephone company. The wired phones all have zero at the bottom,
Oh, okay.
but that's it. I never thought of. I'm looking
Yeah,
at my keyboard has zero at the bottom too.
yeah.
Well, I plead ignorance. I have no idea.
That's okay. So, again, a lot of our viewers wanted to know what phone you currently use now. Obviously, you're considered to be an authority on mobile technology. So, one from Cameron is what phone do you currently have, and how often do you get a new phone?
Well, I'll answer the second part first.
Okay.
I'm a gadget freak, probably just like you are, Sydney. And so I get a new phone every time there's one that has features that I think are different enough. So my latest phone, which I have in front of me, which I know you've probably reviewed this, but it's a
Razor.
Razer,
Yeah.
Droid Razer, and
Nice.
but I had only had the previous phone for 3 or 4 months, which was the what was the name of the Motorola phone that preceded the Razr? In fact, it's still
They
there.
had
His,
the Droid X2, the Bionic, maybe.
I, yeah, I had the Bionic.
Oh, okay.
Just so I just started to figure out how it worked, and then they came out with the. So I try to do what you do. I try to get the new phones and try to see what the differences are and are they
Mhm.
effective. And each one seems to get a little bit better. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah,
That they are.
definitely. It seems like every month there's some, even if it's a little upgrade, it's something that you feel like you have to have. So what
Yep.
made you pick Android?
Oh, as I say, I tried everything. I had
Oh, okay.
one of the iPhones, which I gave to my grandson, and it was interesting that one of the website there's a blog called Droid something or other,
Hmm.
and I just somebody asked me the same question you did on
Oh,
a C program, and I gave them the same answer. I have a new phone every month, and I had an iPhone. I gave it to my grand, and the next thing I know, I look at my Twitter account, and the new tweets are coming in, a new follow coming in I mean, just scrolling in, and it turns out because these guys had a headline, and the headline says, "Cell phone inventor dumps iPhone for Android."
wow.
So they're, yeah. So, but actually, the challenge has been for Android to catch up to iPhone, and I think they're very close
Hmm.
right now.
What do you think
Function.
about what do you think about Windows Phone?
The first I've actually been trying to get one,
Oh, okay.
and I've been actually waiting for a combination that had everything. Because
Yeah.
up till now, I really haven't had a Windows phone that was
Hmm.
the latest. So as soon as this Nokia phone
Yeah.
comes, I'm going to look at it. But the first signs that I've seen are very positive. It looks
Hmm.
like it has a more forgiving user interface
Hmm.
than Android. Android is really a techie kind of.
Yeah.
And my expert, just so you know, that is my wife, who inventor. She invented the jitterbug phone,
Oh,
if you're
okay.
familiar with that, and actually created the company and the system that makes jitterbug work. And
Wow.
she is really demanding about interfaces. She believes interfaces ought to be intuitive. I believe that all interfaces ought to be transparent. You shouldn't even know that the technology exists there if it's a good technology.
Hmm.
So we're getting there, but most computers and cell phones today really are designed with a principle that's exactly the opposite of what I think. Namely, instead of trying to make these things intuitive, they're trying to turn us all into engineers.
Yeah.
They make super flexible and they give you all kinds of options. And that's okay if you're a techie, but
Yeah.
it's one of the things that Steve Jobs tried to do, although it wasn't totally effective, and that is he wanted to make the decisions and tell us what we needed. And sometimes that's the right approach.
Yeah, I actually use Windows Phone personally, and I that's an interesting description that the user interface is more forgiving. If you don't know a lot about phones, it's more understanding of your limitations. That's kind of interesting. I wanted to ask you. You talk a lot about competition in the mobile space, whether it be between carriers or manufacturers. One of the reasons why you made the first cell phone is because you didn't want the monopoly to continue. So this is an interesting question from Peter, I believe is the way you pronounce his name, but his question is about all of the patent wars that we see today. What's your opinion on that, especially some of the non-vital ones like slide to unlock, something that's not really essential? Do you feel like that could harm the consumer in terms of competition, or what do you think about that?
Well, Peter's making an interesting point. The patent system is important because it allows people to invest lots of money in the hope that they'll get a return from it. But he's right. We've gone a little bit too far, and people are starting to patent things that really were not either inspirational or cost a lot of money to create, and they're just using to block other people from using technology. And so we've got a problem, and that problem has to be worked out. The serious part of that problem is that it inhibits little people. I don't mean little, small, and I mean non-corporate
Yeah.
people from participating in this culture, because the corporate guys don't have a problem. They just trade patents. They develop a lot of things and they allow each other to use the patents. But what about us little guys who don't have a patent portfolio? And now, if we want to create something, it makes it very, very difficult. So there is a problem, and I hope that it gets resolved by people loosening up on their licensing policies. And that is, of course, the solution. The worst thing that could happen is for somebody to have a patent and have people just prohibited from using it.
Yeah.
But if in fact they license it and their license fees are reasonable, then the patent thing is not a problem.
Yeah, I agree. What about between the manufacturers, all these different phones? Do you think there's enough innovation to keep things competitive?
That's what competition does, Sydney.
Yeah.
In the sense of the phones, yes, I think we have excellent competition. And the fact that there's a new phone coming out
Yeah.
it seems like every day,
Yeah.
it's kind of a proof of that. And the place that we don't see enough competition, amazingly enough, is among the operators, among the carriers. They give lip service to competition, but they aren't really trying hard enough to differentiate, to offer things. Each carrier should be fighting to get new subscribers based upon their service, upon different things that they do. And right now, they still act a little bit like the old AT&T did, like they've got a monopoly. And so we could use some improvement. I think there are lots of creative things that the carriers could be doing to serve us, we consumers, better.
Okay. Here's a question from KD. His question is, how do you feel about how much cell phones have advanced, and what new technology would you like to see cell phone manufacturers develop in the near future?
Oh, well, obviously, I'm astounded, maybe more so than most people, about all the stuff that's squeezed into a phone.
Yeah.
So but all of this is capability that ultimately can serve us very well.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what I think is wrong in this regard. And once again, I'm picking on the operators. Is they're trying to make us all into one universal person. The operators would like to have their marketing very simple, and simple to them means, well, if we have only one or two categories, then we can minimize the number of phones that we carry, make our job easier. I don't want to make their job easier. I want them to serve everybody,
Yeah.
and we are all different from each other. And given freedom, the people that make the phones would attack each segment of the market individually with phones that are designed for that part of the market. That's the way the market should be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you went to a cell phone store, whether it's Verizon or AT&T or Sprint, almost all the phones look the same. In fact, they have really two categories, feature phones and smartphones. You can't buy a simple phone unless you go for a jitterbug.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons that my wife came up with that. But you should be able to buy a phone that serves your needs, that's designed for you personally. Think about it. If you want a car, you can design a car to, your exact specifications. You can pick the color of the upholstery and every feature on the car and the size of the car and the shape. Well, you can't do that with a cell phone, and yet there are more cell phones made and more people making cell phones than cars. You should be able to have that flexibility too. So that's the biggest thing. One of the future of cell phone is going to be customization, a phone that serves your needs. And of course, the next thing that has to be done is simplify the interface. Back to the beginning of our conversation about do you use Android, Windows, or they're all much too complicated. And my ideal cell phone, and I don't necessarily think that a cell phone ought to be your computer and your tweeter and your medical device. Right now we're trying to squeeze them all into one box. But the ideal cell phone, if you think about it, is maybe something that you wear behind your ear, or people kind of laugh when I say this, it ought to be embedded under your skin, and you ought to chat with it and say, I'll call my cell phone Sam. I'll say, Sam? Yes, sir. Because I like machines to be respectful to me. And Sam will say, and I'll say to Sam, get me Sydney on the phone. And Sam will say, which Sydney is that? Is that the one in Dallas or the one in Syracuse? I say, the Dallas one. The next thing you know, I'm talking to you.
Nice.
That's a simple case, right? Yeah. The only thing better than that is if I didn't have to talk about it, I just think it. Well, it's going to be a wonderful to do that. So that's an ideal phone. And I suspect that there are ideals for things like tweeting, for accessing your database, for reading email. And somehow or other, we ought to be able to get an optimum for every one of those things, even if it takes different devices.
Interesting. Now, I wanted to talk about something that you're very passionate about. You're on the FCC's Spectrum Advisory Committee, and you've talked a lot about this so-called spectrum crunch that many people are claiming that we're in. The carriers are talking about it. Do you actually think this is a legitimate problem? Will we run out of spectrum in the future?
Well, I'll give you the short answers first.
Okay.
I hope I'm not talking too much on all these issues, Sydney. But is it a legitimate problem? Yes. Is there a shortage? Is there a scarcity? No, there's not. We've never run out of spectrum. Every time we think of something interesting we want to do with the spectrum, they always find more spectrum. And the reason is that somehow or other, every time we need more spectrum, we literally create new spectrum using technology. Since the creation of radio, which was maybe 110 years ago, every time we've needed more spectrum, we've applied some new technology, and we have doubled the capacity of the spectrum, the amount of information that we can put through the spectrum every 2.5 years. And if you work that out in your head over 100 years, that's 1 trillion times more spectrum.
Wow.
So that's what we've done in the past. Well, there's enough technology available that we know about already that we could do that for another 50 or 60 years and maybe indefinitely. So what's the problem? Why are we not using the spectrum? And by the way, what's that mean to us, the consumer? It's the cost.
Hmm.
Because I wonder if your listeners, viewers agree that broadband costs much, wireless broadband costs much too much now.
Yeah.
We it's the big inhibitor to people's use of all these great features that we've got, and the carriers, in my view, are not adopting the spectrum, the new technologies fast enough. So you might ask me, I'm sorry to be having to ask you, but
That's
ask me,
okay.
you might ask me, why are they not doing that?
Exactly,
Well,
yeah.
why are they asking for more spectrum? Well, just think about it. If you own a piece of spectrum, you got a monopoly. Nobody else can use that spectrum. And so make that spectrum more valuable. You have less competition. Well, you know my views on that. We
Yeah.
started out with that. There ought to be more competition. And so at some point, the operators will have to adopt new technology. Just think about it. There is no additional spectrum. All we can do is increase the capacity. So at some point, they can try taking spectrum away from the Army, from the police services. At some point, there won't be anything left, and they're going to have to adopt a new technology.
Yeah.
And we already know what that is. The next step in the technology is the use of a technology called smart antennas.
Yeah.
Allows you to have many, many more people on a channel. They have a thing called cognitive radio that's a more advanced thing of like smart antennas. So a lot of technology, and interestingly enough, that technology actually saves not only us money, but the carriers as well.
Hmm.
So that's how the spectrum crunch is going to get solved. It's not going to be solved by redistributing the spectrum. It's going to be solved by adopting new technology.
Interesting. Do you think that where we have a lot more LTE devices like the Droid Razor, do you think LTE's capacity can also help with this problem, with the situation?
Well, it's a interesting question. It turns out that LTE doesn't do very much in that regard
Oh.
until you add all of these new technologies onto LTE.
Oh, okay.
Amazingly enough, the first place to put these smart antennas are on the cell sites, and you've seen cell sites throughout the city. Right now, all these cell sites just use a single antenna to cover either an area around the cell site or a sector. And the first thing they're going to do is put multiple antennas at each cell site, and the next day after that is they start putting multiple antennas in the cell phones themselves.
Oh.
And when you do that, instead of broadcasting, which cell sites do now, they'll be sending the energy right from a cell site right into your cell phone.
Hmm.
And your cell phone will be listening only to that cell site and not to others. And when you do that, you get much, much more efficient. You know? So I
Nice.
don't know if any makes sense to you, but it's efficiency. If they
Yeah.
get more efficient, they can serve more people, and they can do it at much lower cost. And that's the crucial thing.
Right.
We don't care about capacity. We care about getting service at affordable costs.
Yeah, that's really the best part. Okay, one more question. If you could team up with Motorola again and create something like the first cell phone or another cell phone today, what would it be like?
Well, why would it have to be like the cell phone? I mean, I really think I want to go on to something new and different. So nobody's ever asked me that before. But my first reaction to that is I'm back to the customization thing. I'm trying to figure out what it is that I want to do that I get frustrated at, and that will improve my life, because that's the only function of technology, isn't that right? Technology is supposed to serve us,
Yeah.
and the thing that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and the other guys do is they say, well, we're going to make you an engineer. We end up spending more time trying to figure out the technology than what the technology is supposed to do for us. So I'm dodging around your question because I'm thinking madly what I would invent. I think that there are lots of people that are not being served well by existing technology. One example might, well, I mentioned my wife's approach of building a very simple phone
Mm-hmm.
that today is used mostly by seniors, but really by people who want simplicity.
Yeah.
But there are other segments of the population that are neglected. One might be how about housewives? We spend so much time setting women free from the kitchen that we forget that there are a lot of women who enjoy being in the kitchen, and yet they're not being served well. People have not built appliances. They built lots of kitchen appliances, but they haven't yet got the communications appliance
Mm.
for somebody that is a housewife. How about family appliances? We don't have any of those yet either. The things that are designed so that it brings the family together, in contrast with things like uh, YouTube, like blogging, that somehow get people together that have common interests. So that's what I think I would do. I would find a market that is unserved and try to invent something that would make the lives of those people more comfortable.
Nice. I like that. The technology serves us. That's really the point of it. Well, Marty, thank you very much for joining us for this interview. I'm sure our viewers will appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. You have a Twitter account, right?
Oh, I'm Marty Mobile,
Okay.
Marty Mobile.
Okay, nice.
So,
I've
so
been following
all you,
you.
I would be looking at my tweet account, and I hope that you will not only follow me, but try to get me to respond to questions because I love to answer. I haven't figured that out yet.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. I've been following you for a while, so I already knew the answer to the question about the phone that you're using, the Droid Razr. I remember you tweeting about that, but we'll definitely let our viewers know. And again, thank you very much. Thank you guys for watching this video. Follow him on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at PhoneDog_Sydney, and we will see you guys later. Bye.